Hey, welcome back to the Car Doctor Studios. Thanks for stopping by. Appreciate the likes and subscriptions to our channel. Anyway, hope this video is helpful. I'm going to go through some common tips and tricks for best practices on no-start scenarios. This particular vehicle is a Chevy truck. The 5.3, actually this is a 5.7. This is a 2000 K2500 4x pickup with the 5.7 Vortec. So this is the older school system with that flat distributor cap in the back of the motor. Does not have the individual coil packs or anything, and it has the old school CIS injection system. Came in for an issue where it cranks but doesn't start. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about some of the common problems and your best practices for diagnosing those issues and getting it back on the road. So first order of business, as with any no start issue, the three things, the three big hits: the fuel, spark, and compression. So basically, first thing I've done here is crank it over. It sounds like it's got good compression. If you've listened to these enough, you can pretty much identify a motor with no compression. They're gonna kind of sing over like a Toyota with a blown timing belt, or a Subaru four-banger with the timing belt slipped and it just goes. So that's not the case here. It's obviously got some compression, and I'm going to assume that the compression is good at this point, so we can move on to the other common issues. I would say on this particular rig, all the way through the from the late 90s to mid 2000s, most common issue affecting these as a no start scenario is going to be the fuel pump. And in this case, we actually threw a pump module, the AC Delco part, actually the Delphi part, excuse me, approximately a year ago. So I'm highly doubtful it's going to be a fuel pump issue. And also, when we energize the key, I can hear the fuel pump running, and it registers as having fuel in the tank. A couple things here. This one has the schrader valve in the back left side of the motor, just down over here, a little black plastic cap. So I removed that after energizing the fuel pump, basically turning the key on, letting it sit for a few seconds. Turn it off, and then I just depress the schrader valve. You want to make sure you don't get fuel sprayed in your face, but if it's developing some pressure, I think it's probably safe to say that your pump's good, the circuit to the pump is good. You know, it can be, especially on the CIS models, it will not squirt the injectors if it doesn't have enough pressure, which is somewhere around 50. Not sure exactly, but I think it's 55 running pressure. And if you have a low pressure scenario, like 25, 30 pounds, it's not enough to fire these injectors. So that's something to think about, especially with this particular truck, but not the case here. So if you don't have a fuel pressure gauge, like I was saying, you can kind of depress the schrader valve. You should get some fuel out of there. In worst case scenario, and you had a can of starting fluid, just throw a little bit of, squirt a little starting fluid in the air intake. Then if it fires, you know it's a fuel supply issue. Could still be a problem with the pump, clogged filter, even injectors not getting signal. So you may have to do some additional diagnosis on that side, but not the case here. I've already confirmed that it is getting fuel pressure. And we're going to move on to the spark side. One handy tool I have, which I suggest, they're relatively inexpensive. I think you can get these for less than 20 bucks off Amazon. It's basically a spark tester that will go, one end will adapt to the spark plug wire, and the other one will slip on the spark plug itself. And right in this glass area here, it'll show the spark being delivered on the secondary side of the ignition circuit. Pretty cool little deal. So I'm going to slip this on to the number one plug over here on the driver's side and get someone to crank it while I observe for spark. So I basically remove the number one wire, and I install my tool onto the plug end. Hook that up to the wire. And now as we crank, I'll observe for spark here. Go ahead and crank it. Okay. No spark there. So what I'll do now is move over to the coil side. I'm going to check it for spark here. On this vehicle, the coil is external to the distributor, and it's located right here on the right rear side of the motor. Now disconnect the wire from the distributor. I'm just going to route it over here next to a ground and see if we get spark out of this end. All right, go ahead and crank it. Okay. So we're getting great spark out of the coil. So basically, seeing that we have spark and it's coming out of the coil but not being distributed out of the distributor, I'm going to assume that this is a bad distributor cap and rotor. Here's the cap and rotor on this rig. Whenever replacing these, I recommend you go with the quality cap and rotor. It definitely used to be that you'd only want to use GM parts on this particular ignition system, and I would recommend it if you're not worried about the cost. The GM part's going to be probably the best option for you. However, I've had great success with these BWD parts, and I'm going with the premium cap and rotors. So some engineer decided in this case that it would be best to get a distributor cap like this, so that all the wires would be routed out of the side in this fashion. It doesn't even go by the firing order here. It puts out either right or left bank right out of the side in numerical order, and it just makes the routing better, but it presents some problems because that secondary voltage is having to travel through these circuits in the cap, and they're prone to failure inside the cap by moisture and crossover shorting. As these parts wear, the rotor wears, or the rotator button, or any of these contacts wear, they're prone to burning across, creating a misfire issue, or in this case, I'm assuming it's going to create a no spark situation, no spark at all. So we're going to pull the old cap and rotor off and inspect them. And basically, in this case, it's going to call for, what is this, a T20 and a T15 Torx drivers to get them off. And I'm also going to pull this air intake off of here to allow me to get access back to the distributor cap. And you just got to kind of crawl up under the hood here and get at that to access it. But that'll allow you plenty of room there, and you could even number your wires, but they're pretty easy to identify which cylinder they go to, and they're numbered here usually along the cap, so that'll make it easier. And we'll pull that thing off and take a look. Okay, well, I got the cap and rotor off, and we found the problem. So this part of the rotor, the contact portion that sticks in there, is completely fallen off. And actually one of these screws was fallen off as well. So this thing was probably just oscillating around in there. And that's not going to cut it. The rest of the cap looks decent, but we're going to replace it. So I think we found your problem, sir. Get this guy fixed up. Yeah, be sure you get all your parts out of there. In this case, there's a small tab where the button of the rotor sits that also is down in there, that I thought of to go look for. So I got that. Basically this part here, and then this had fallen off too. So another thing that reminds me is the customer said that it made a funny noise and then it quit. And when this came off, it was probably starting to squeal and make some noise coming out of the distributor before it crapped out. So also you pay attention where this is pointing, where it's oriented. That'll help you on reinstallation. It only goes on one way, but you could waste a lot of time trying to put it on backwards. And then there'll be some replacement screws. Take care on replacing the two larger screws that go in the cap. And a lot of these distributors are plastic bodied, and those screws actually thread into a plastic distributor housing, and you don't want to strip those out and have to worry about that. So go ahead and throw this back on. Okay, we'll reinstall the air cleaner intake air duct. We'll see if this thing cranks up. Nice. Well, this thing looks like a success, which turned out pretty good. So, you know, just some things to think about, and you know, I probably missed some things, and if you can think of something great that will be helpful, then go ahead and comment down at the video. I'm not going to pretend to be, you know, like I don't still have stuff I can learn. And I appreciate your involvement as a community. We can help each other out. This could be a great video for us to build each other's knowledge base, and probably think of some things that I missed, especially common just to generic no start issues and the stuff we can deal with. You know, it's different for different makes and models, of course, different ignition systems, different fuel systems, and there's a lot we learn over the years, but this one definitely old school, and nothing surprising here. So hope this video helps. Again, I appreciate you watching, and I will catch you next time. Have a good one.